On the day of the shooting, we know that officers stopped the suspect. They let him go, but they stopped him. He slipped through the sheriff's hands. It's kind of rhetorical to ask if the sheriff, Mr. Dupnik, will apologize. But Dupnik, the sheriff, knew that Jared Loughner had written "Die Bitch" on that note from her in 2007. He knew that on the day of the shooting, which calls into great question the motives, Sheriff Dupnik here, in the way he has conducted himself since the shooting and since he decided to go public on television with his idle speculation as to the reason for the shooting. From a layman's perch here, it appears that Sheriff Dupnik has been acting with malice as he runs around and blames Sarah Palin and blames me and others who do what I do for this sordid incident. Will Obama say tonight in his remarks in Tucson that Dupnik acted stupidly, as he did in describing the actions of the cop in Cambridge? Will Obama castigate Dupnik? No, this is not going to happen. He called Dupnik and thanked him yesterday. He called Sheriff Dupnik, the president did, to thank him for his great work in keeping Pima County safe and following up in his efforts to find out what happened here. So, no, Obama will not castigate Dupnik, and the rest of the media and the Democrats are jumping to conclusions. He will not insist on holding a beer summit with Dupnik. Why was that "Die Bitch" note covered up? I mean, it's now, how many days? Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 4 days. 4 days, and we are still learning about all. Why did the media bury that information? Why did Good Morning America bury on their website till the second page, the 12th paragraph, the good friend saying, he didn't listen to political radio. He didn't like the news. Well, exactly. The allegations are far more interesting than the facts. The allegations, the speculation, far more interesting to the media, which would also love to see talk radio shut down and put out of business, along with Fox News. You can't take that out of the equation. You can't call this an isolated incident. This is just the latest in a pattern. Here's Jim Clyburn, Monday night on NPR's All Things Considered. The host is Robert Siegel. He said to Congressman Clyburn, I want to ask you to draw upon your own personal experience in your life. People are commonly saying that the political environment nationwide is today more vitriolic, more toxic than ever. You're an African-American from South Carolina, and you came up at a time when a black man who asserted himself could face really serious consequences. And there was nothing unusual about death threats at that time. Does this really compare to, say, the 60s in South Carolina?
During the 1960s, we saw the cattle prods. We did see some murders, and they were very, very unfortunate. But we didn't have the internet back then. We had restraint on speech back then. I came up in a time that the fairness doctrine did not allow media outlets to say things about a candidate or a person in public office without giving that person equal time to respond. And I really believe that everybody needs to take a look at where we are pushing things and may need to take a serious step back and evaluate what's going on.
So a question about 60s racism in America related to an event Saturday in Tucson becomes, we have to get the fairness doctrine back because elected officials don't have the chance to respond to all of the lies that they claim are being told about them. Is there more hate and bigotry now or back in the times of the civil rights movement? More hate and bigotry now? I mean, that's insane to claim that there's more hate and bigotry now. Besides, racism has got nothing to do with this. Racism, not one thing to do with what happened in Tucson. Yet that's his expertise that the NPR people wanted to call it. Here's the New York Times story. Carl Hulse, for Boehner, rampage imposes its own agenda. Speaker John Boehner expected to spend his first celebratory weeks as the new leader of the House, showcasing his party's differences with Democrats. But the shooting rampage in Arizona upended those plans. Now Mr. Boehner is being called on to play a far less partisan role, leading Republicans and Democrats alike through a difficult period. How he performs will not only be critical in shaping his national image, but also could frame his relations with his own party and with the Democrat minority. So here is the New York Times trying to, a despicable bunch, trying to use this terrible tragedy to threaten John Boehner and the rest of the congressional Republicans into going back on their promises and to defy the clearly expressed will of the American people last November. So once again, the media, Democrat accomplices all, seeking to gain political advantage over this shooting. It's everywhere you look on the left, this attempt to politicize and advance their agenda. This is, as far as the Times is concerned, a subtle brand of psychological terrorism. What they and the rest of our one-party media want is a neutered Republican House of Representatives. And who knows? They might get it. The title for the Times webpage for this story is this: Tucson shooting upends Speaker Boehner's plans. What their assertion should read is, let's hope that the Tucson shooting upends Speaker Boehner's plans. Rampage must impose different agenda on Boehner. That's what they're hoping for. And the shooting rampage in Arizona has got to upend Boehner's plans. And we at the New York Times are hell-bent on seeing to it that that happens. Aware that a crisis can play out politically in unforeseen ways, House officials say decisions are being made day to day and depend on factors like the medical condition of Representative Giffords and the other shooting victims and on the national mood. Now, if that's true, it's preposterous. I mean, as tragic as these shootings are, they should have absolutely no bearing upon the issues facing Congress in the upcoming weeks, such as getting spending under control, such as repealing Obamacare. What does the shooting have to do with that? It doesn't. It has not one iota to do with it, unless you are part of the Obama regime hoping to use this to intimidate Republicans into just abandoning their agenda because we at the New York Times and elsewhere in the media are going to say that your agenda is divisive and your agenda helped lead to the climate and your supporters and your media helped create the climate that led to this shooting. And so, Speaker Boehner, if you know what's good for you, and if you know what's good for your supportive media, if you know what's good for the country, you'll abandon your agenda. That's how they take an unfortunate tragedy like this while claiming to be heartbroken for the victims. They, behind closed doors, eagerly rubbing their hands together, strategizing how they can use this incident to advance their political agenda and do great harm to their political opponents. Now, commentators, right and left, make that left and far left, actually, are telling us that toning down the political rhetoric will improve our national body politic. Well, let's take that premise. If liberals really want to improve the political debate, I have some suggestions on rhetoric that can be toned down. I would first ask the media and President Obama and the Democrat Party to tone down all this class envy rhetoric. I'd stop with all the lies about the evil rich getting richer on the backs of the poor and about the rich who pay most of the taxes in this country not paying their fair share. I would, if I were the far left, I would stop all this talk that is pitting one economic group of people against another. I'd get rid of it. It is creating to a climate of distrust and anger and resentment. I would also ask the left and the Democrats tone down the anti-business rhetoric. Try to acknowledge for once we have the best environmental track record in the history of the world, that we have the highest living standard thanks to American innovators. All of this talk about big oil, big pharma, big plastic, big retail as being the enemies of the American people. Stop it. What are you going to do? Require Target to change their brand name? How many Target stores are there with their logo and icon all over the store and their printed materials? You're going to take after them next? And along the same lines, those of you on the left, I would tone down all the anti-capitalist rhetoric. Acknowledge that free enterprise has brought more prosperity to the world than any other economic system. Tone down all the anti-doctor rhetoric. The President of the United States accuses American doctors of doing unnecessary in the midst of the healthcare debate.
And again, all the rhetoric against big pharma, big food, big oil, big plastic, big retail, big everything, big profit. It is the left that has an enemies list, and it is every high-profile success story having to do with capitalism in America. I would also say, those of you in the civil rights industry, how about toning down your rhetoric? What is it that gives you license to call everybody who disagrees with you on anything, from affirmative action to illegal immigration, racists? In fact, those of you on the left, you've got to stop something else. Every time somebody disagrees with you, you call it hate speech. You got to stop that. You're creating a climate here that is unstable. You're creating frustration and anger. Notice how the left gets a pass on all this. Every time this entire topic comes up, the left, harmless little angels out there just trying to make sure all the bad guys don't get away with it. What about Reverend Wright's rhetoric? Obama said he could no more disown Reverend Wright for what he said than he could disown his own white grandmother. There's some pure hate in Obama's church that he heard for 20 years. And then after you leftists start toning down your rhetoric, start toning down your policies that rob Americans of their freedom and their prosperity. If you do all of that, if you leftists take my advice, the political climate in this country will improve beyond measure. The happiness quotient will improve beyond measure. Economic prosperity will once again become the order of the day. Happiness will spread far and wide throughout the country. But then that doesn't help advance your agenda, does it? You need chaos. You need people feeling displaced and aimless. You feel people needing worried about the future, so you can set yourselves up as the saviors and the solution. So yeah, it's pretty offensive. Pretty offensive to listen to the architects of all that's wrong with this country blame people who have literally nothing to do with anything they're being accused of doing.